Good morning. My name is Bob Hebert. I'm the superintendent at Northeastern Clinton Central School. And thanks to Calvin today, I would like to have an opportunity to present to you the process that we used in preparing our budget for this year, and also to review with you some of the changes and some of the reasons for those changes. It was a very difficult process. The Board of Education had a very difficult time in preparing this budget. At the budget workshop on April 12th, after reviewing every single line item, they were able to cut $1,163,292. And then with those cuts, in additions to the budget, it was still at 8.7%. And the board realized that that was going to be way too high. So they had to make some more cuts, which were very difficult cuts. And some of these cuts included eliminating the 3/5 middle school counselor, taking the 4 part-time positions that we had and reducing those by 20%. 2 elementary teachers were retiring, and through attrition, they decided not to replace those teachers. One of the reasons was because the projected enrollment for our kindergarten was going to be low, and we had a couple classes where we could maximize the number of students in order to reduce our cost. And with these additional costs, amounting to $466,742, the board was able to reduce the tax rate to about 6.3%. And this was with a budget increase of approximately 6.7%. The board still felt that this was too high, so we looked at doing a one-time increase to the appropriated fund balance of $50,000. And that allowed them to take that 6.3 and drop it to 5.7%. But since then, we've had some new information because the assessments have gone out, and with the new information, that rate of 5.7% was reduced to 2.8%. So basically, the budget that we're presenting to you or bringing to the voters will be an increase of 2.8% in the tax rate. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to go through the budget with you and explain some of the reasons for the changes. The first one under general support that I'd like to focus on is the actual Board of Education. There is a reduction of 13%. The board recognizes the need to reduce the budget, and basically the workshops and the sessions that they will be attending will probably be mostly local, so they were able to reduce some of that money. The next area that I'd like to look at is auditing services. You'll see an increase of approximately 38%, from $10,494 to $14,526. And that's because of the new auditing program that our controller has put into place. We need to have an internal auditor in addition to the external auditor that we have. This would be considered a non-funded mandate, and we needed to put some money in there to pay for this internal auditor. Under the legal services, there's an increase of about 22%. There's been an increase in legal rates, and there are more things that we have to look at along those lines. In the operation and maintenance, you will find that there's an increase of approximately 14.3%, and that's because of the increased cost of fuel and electricity that we're all facing. Under central printing and mailing, there's a decrease of 39%, and that's basically because we have cut the district newsletter that we had been sending out 4 times a year to every resident in the district. So the general support area is up approximately 10.3%, and that's mostly due to our fuel increase. Under instruction, there's a 7% decrease, and that's basically under the supervision of regular school. As many of you probably know by now, Joanna Orr, one of our very valued administrator, is going to be retiring this year, and due to the change, we're able to actualize a savings. And under in-service training, there's a decrease of approximately 9%, and that's because we have tried to use all of our federal grant money to provide most of our in-service training rather than take it out of the regular budget. The teaching regular school, there's a 1% reduction, and that has to do with those 2 teacher retirements that we had, that I mentioned earlier, and an increase of 18% for programs for children with handicapping conditions. Our occupational education has gone up 83%, and that's because we've had an increased enrollment in the students that will be attending the BOCES CV Tech program. We have a much larger class coming up this year than we have had, so our numbers have gone up considerably. We have a decrease of 71% for continuing ed and summer school because the board did cut summer school this year. So the instruction summary is an increase of approximately 7% overall. The district transportation, basically, even in their summary, you'll see that there's an increase, but that's related to fuel, the increased cost of fuel. And if you look at the undistributed, which is the employee benefits, the debt service, the inter-transfer funds, you'll find that that's up approximately 6.7%. If we look at, give Sheila a chance to change the transparencies. Okay, if we look at the charges for services, you'll find that there's basically a decrease here, and that has to do with our students that pay tuition from Vermont. Even though the tuition rate has gone from $78 to $8,000, we find that there's a decrease in the number of students coming over due to a lower number of students at the high school level. So we were originally we had around 90 students, and now we're down to around 65 students. So that accounts for the decrease in the funds. When you look at use of money and property, you'll see that there is an increase there. That's because of the interest that we're accruing on our tax cert that we have. And if you look at the miscellaneous, there's an increase because of the E-rate, also the teacher that we have on leave or a reassignment, Diane Bonifant, who works for the Teacher Resource Center. And there's a 7.9% in the state sources, which is our aid, our state aid. And if you look at the fund balance now, you'll see that there is an increase of $50,000 because, as I mentioned earlier, we decided to put a one-time $50,000 increase in the fund balance to lower the tax rate. So the estimated tax rate is $22.12 a thousand.
too far because that
Okay.
camera won't know you moved. Okay, Calvin Castine in front of the camera, and first of all, I want to thank Bob Hebert for continuing a tradition that was started many years ago with his predecessor, Chris de Grandpré, and that's sitting down with us and going over this budget process. I think it's helpful to the people who are voting out there, and obviously the school and the school board might think it's a little helpful too, this little one-on-one and another chance to present the budget process. How many people, Bob, do you get that show up at the budget meetings? It's got to be a very small but faithful group.
Well, at the last budget work meeting that we had, I think we had around 45, 50 people. I believe you were there filming
Yeah.
that. That was a very good turnout. But as far as the budget workshops themselves, and we try to hold one every month, beginning with the month of February, sometimes even as early as January, there are very few people. And I think part of that is because it's really early to make decisions. However, it's very important that you start the dialogue and we talk about various things, and it gives people an opportunity to give their input as to what they feel is really important in the educational system, so that when the board members have to come to those final meetings where they do have to make the cuts, they have a lot of the input from the community. I find that it's different people that attend different meetings. So.
Since you've been here, as you just mentioned that board members have to find the cuts, that's pretty much been the story, that every year you have to cut because everything keeps going up and up.
Yeah, it's like in a regular household. I think this year more than any other year, we were hit even harder with Katrina and with the increased cost in fuel. I mean, all we have to do is fill up our cars at the gas pump, and we know that we're being hit with increased costs as far as fuel, electricity. Just to give you a projection, for the electricity, we had to go up 31.1%, which is $106,111. Our fuel, we went up 41.5% for next year, which is $65,885. And the diesel fuel for the buses is up 94%, and that's $65,910. So, and our water and sewer rates have gone up approximately 17%.
Now, it brings up an interesting question when you talk about fuel. None of us a year ago, as far as our own personal spending, as far as putting gas in our car or fuel oil in our tanks at home, could possibly have projected an accurate figure, because it did jump dramatically after the hurricanes, and it unfortunately has bounced back up to those high levels at the present time. Obviously, you probably spent more this year than you budgeted as far as fuel costs go.
Yes, we did.
So
Yes, we did.
where does that come out of?
Well, basically, that we were fortunate this year so that there is enough money, so we'll be able to get through this year, but it's next year's projection. We got some additional state aid back from the capital projects that we've been working on, so we used some of that money. But it's a very difficult thing when you're trying to project what your fuel costs are going to be. We try to lock in as soon as we can so that we get a decent rate. But the other thing that we have done, and we started a facilities committee, and out of that facilities committee we've had some very interesting conversations, and one of the recommendations that was made by a facilities committee member was to put in a used oil furnace. And that made a lot of sense, because we're trying to think out of the box in any which way we can to conserve. So we did purchase that, and because with all our buses, when we change the oil, that would give us an extra source of fuel. So we have put that in place, and that was a wonderful suggestion. Another thing that we're looking at is in the summertime is we're going to shut off the air conditioning in the school. It's mostly the office staff that's here. The kids aren't here, so we're trying to look for all the different ways we can, in addition to what we have cut in our budget, to try to conserve more. Because, as you mentioned, we don't really know if what we have budgeted will even, meet the needs next year, so.
Well, air conditioning, are you able to control it room by room though? Or-
What we would be doing is shutting down the central air conditioning,
Yeah, so you can keep your own
Right, yeah.
room comfortable. And, okay. Some of the figures that, some of the minor figures, you gave a figure of Board of Education going down whatever percent, that's $800, $850, so it's not too dramatic. And percentage-wise, but,
Well, the only thing that you have to remember is that when the Board of Education, in the first line of cuts, we cut a lot of money out of that. We were looking at putting in brand-new policy manuals, which would have been around $3,800, something that we do need to do. So again, in trying to conserve money, we've established a policy review committee, myself and a couple board members, and we meet at night and we pull the latest policies off from the school boards, and we're trying to adapt the policies that way rather than have a service do it. A lot of the districts have the service do it, and we did have that money in there in the beginning, but because of the restraints on the budget, we took it out. So, but this was in addition to what we already had taken out.
yeah, but my point is, it's a big savings percentage-wise, but it's a small amount in the overall budget.
Right.
It's like,
That's correct.
100% of $2 or 2% of $1 million is a is a big
Right.
is a big difference in the dollars spent. Business administration. How does that differ other than central administration? You're central administration,
That's correct.
and you have an office staff, and I assume that's all part of that central administration.
Yes, we took a lot out of business administration because this district, for its size, probably should have a business administrator. We do not have a full-time business administrator. What we have is the services of Mr. William Knaust from the Retired Business Administrators Association, who comes in 2 days a month. We want to go into the direction of probably putting in a full-time business administrator, but this was not the year for it. So
I thought we had moved in that direction just about the time when you were arriving.
we did, but that individual is no longer with us, and we have not been able to replace that position yet. It's very difficult, right now for business administrators. We thought what we would look at was trying to have a shared service through BOCES, but there is no other district at this time that's interested in that service.
Do the other schools all have business administrators, or what? How are they handling it?
I think most of the ones that are our size, for instance, NAC just hired a business administrator this year. I think most of them have a full-time business administrator. Saranac does, and Plattsburgh, and most of the largest school districts have have a business administrator.
Okay. Let's look at some of these figures here. Things that might stand out.
Well, the one that does stand out, as I pointed out, was auditing, because I'm sure that most of the people are aware of the scandals that have taken place down in New York City, and how the controller has stepped in and has come out with a 5-point plan dealing with school districts, and that means that you now have to have an internal auditor, and that's someone that we will have to hire in addition to having an auditing committee, which is comprised of board members. We still have to have an internal auditor in addition to the external auditor that we have at the end of the year.
I only see a $4,000 increase in the auditing services. Is that other?
Well, because we're hoping that, this we could do probably on an hourly rate, and hopefully we only have to do it 2 or 3 times a year, because I think our books are pretty good.
Okay. Let's see, instruction, supervision, we show a $41,000 decline. He said that was Joanna Orr retiring.
Right, we're really
But
gonna miss.
but we're not reducing the amount of supervision, we're just.
No, not at this time. No, it's just the fact that, Joanna has been with the district for a long time, a very highly valued administrator, and we're going to hate to see her go, but there will be a change in the salary from the person that takes her place.
Quite a change, 41,000.
Well, no, you're looking at benefits and you're looking at other factors there too, so.
Okay. Teaching regular school went down. He said that's because you're able to assimilate some of the classes. You get teachers retiring, and you're not going to replace.
Right,
like you
we
said.
have 2 elementary teachers that are going to be retiring. And this is a very, very difficult decision because we have to maximize as much as possible. And one of the things that we had said we hoped we would never have to do was to move students from one school district to another. But depending on what grade level we decide to reduce, it may mean changing a few students from one school to another. Hopefully, it would be done, first of all, on a voluntary basis. But that's a very difficult decision for a school district to make.
So at this point, you don't really know.
Which grade level? No. It'll all depend when all the numbers are done, because over the summer, sometimes we have students that move into the district, we have students that move out of the district. We aren't really sure yet as to which grade levels it'll be.
So this is going to entail. Any idea the number of kids that are going to be going from, if they're now in Rouse's Point, they're going to be going to Moores or vice versa? Or?
I don't know. Right now, when we're looking at some classes, we may be looking at between 5 and maybe 8 students that would have to move. But as I said, we would, first of all, try to do it as a voluntary basis.
In varying classes, or all roughly the same?
No, it would be for the one class
That one
level
class.
that we would be reducing, and hopefully, we're looking at kindergarten as being one of the classrooms that we're looking at because of the low number of projected enrollment that we had. So that would be their first time in school, so whatever school they would go to, it wouldn't be a relocation.
Are the projections showing fewer students in the upcoming years? You say you have a lower kindergarten this year,
Well,
or next year?
it all depends. We're having fewer students, as I pointed out, coming in from Vermont. I think they have a lower student population there. And right now, we have 2 large classes that are moving through. It's almost like a bubble in the high school. The classes that are replacing those classes are lower in number. But that's the one that I guess is responsible for the increase
In the BOCES?
in the BOCES, in the Occ-Ed, because it's such a large class that's moving up. So
Now, somebody asked me a while ago, I think it was after last week's budget meeting, BOCES has a set number of students, or CV Tech, we should be saying, I guess, has a set number of students that they will take. Do we know that all of our students will be able to attend?
basically, with that program, all the students who meet the criteria that are set by the school have an opportunity to go. You can't really limit that number.
So CV Tech has to take them
Yes,
if they
correct.
meet the criteria.
Yeah.
So doesn't matter how many they've got going there now.
Right.
Next year, that's going to change for them, just like it's changing for us sending them. So
Right,
obviously,
exactly. They would have to have additional staff.
and I would assume that this population bubble in those 2 grades isn't unique just to Northeastern. I would assume that the whole region.
The whole region, I would think
is
so,
kind of
but
the baby boomers in a generation in 2 years here.
that's right.
So the school numbers of kindergartners is probably lower than the seniors that we're losing this year. Or is numbers going down?
Yes, it is. But again, like, we never really know on our final count on kindergarten. When we first started our projection, it was around 70. When we did the The registry.
70, that's all, really?
When we did the registration, it came out to around 90. But again, with St. Mary's staying open, we don't know how many students maybe,
Yeah.
were registering at both schools, so.
Just to be safe, yeah.
So we don't know for sure.
Well, not that they need, not that they need to, let's say they're not registered yet, and they're in this district, you're still gonna accommodate them.
Right.
You can't say, oh, you didn't register, so you
That's right,
you can't
absolutely.
come in.
Right, and then you can have some that move into in the summertime, so.
Right. Or some that decide to, you and I were both at a concert last night, and Kathy Coates was mentioning that one of her tenors, because of Wyeth,
Was not there,
moved
right.
away during the school year. So those things happen, and we're
Like-
not going to get into Wyeth because
No.
that's such a scary thing that we can't really project what's going to happen there. Into the instruction area, Bob.
Yeah,
We were talking about the supervisor, Mrs. Orr retiring. Now, teaching regular school has dropped down, as we just mentioned.
right.
But programs for children with handicapping conditions has increased significantly from 3.7 million to 4.4 million. And this is something that, in talking to school board members and in talking to you, that we really have no control over at all, do we?
No, we don't. Our special ed, I guess budget increase is about 18%, which is 680,000, well, $680,910, if we want to be a little specific. We really have no control over that. We have a high identification rate here in this district. It's not because we over-identify, but we have to provide an equal and appropriate education for all the students. And students that need services, we are bound to provide those services. And that's where part of our higher identification rate comes in. We are working on trying to reduce that as much as possible, and hopefully that we can declassify some students as we proceed on. But right now, it is a very high rate.
Now, it's a tricky area here when we start identifying who was in there, not individually, but the categories. Obviously, when many of us think of handicapped children, we think of Down syndrome children, but and blind children, or children with hearing problems, or children in a wheelchair, or muscular dystrophy. But there's a whole lot of other areas that are also included in that, aren't there?
Yes, there are. When you're looking at students with handicapping conditions, you can be looking at providing services such as occupational therapy. You can be looking at providing services such as physical therapy, speech, counseling. All of these are services that we do provide in our special needs program. And some of these services are provided right here in our school. In addition to that, we have resource rooms, so if some students have difficulty learning, we can provide some additional assistance in resource room. So all of these are different services that we provide to try to allow our children who do have special needs to be able to function at an appropriate level in the regular ed program.
And for those of you out there who are like me and don't know the difference between occupational therapy and physical therapy, you told me off camera physical therapy is moving the big motor muscles
Big
and so
motor
on.
muscles,
And then occupational
Physical
therapy
therapy
might
would
be just
the smaller muscles, right?
just learning how to hold a pencil and properly
Working with some of your smaller muscles, right?
right, so that they can become occupied and maybe push buttons on a calculator or that type of thing where they could.
Right, or there may be other problems here. Your occupational therapy can cover several different areas depending on what the needs are. There's usually an assessment that's done with any of the students before they receive any services, and based upon that assessment, there's a plan, and then that plan is enacted.
Now, unfortunately for school districts, the state has determined that taking care of these children is not a state problem, it's an individual school district problem.
Basically, if you have a student that resides within your district, then they are entitled to whatever services they need to have an equal and appropriate education.
Now, to me, it would make sense that it wouldn't matter if that child migrated from the Northeastern District to the Shazy District or over to the Northern Adirondack District or wherever, that the state should pick up the tab for that child. It's a resident of the state, but that's not the case. If that child moves from Northeastern to Shazy, then all those expenses become Shazy's
That's
responsibility.
Right, they do, but there is aid that's provided, but unfortunately with aid, as we all know, it comes in the subsequent years. It's not for that particular year. So when you do prepare your budget, you have to actually look at the dollars that you're going to expend, not the money that you're going to get in your aid.
In our district, you said 18.4% of our students have been identified as having some sort of special needs.
Of a service that is rendered to them. That's right. If you look at the new car report that came out, this district had approximately an 18.4% classification rate,
And public schools in this for the state,
around 12.2%.
12.2%. So we are 50% higher than the state average. So that,
But we are working at trying to bring that down. But basically, as I said, we need to provide for every child that we have in our district.
yeah, and it's not, there's nothing that we as taxpayers or you as administrators or the board as the school board can do about that. That has to be done, and that's a state mandate. I keep hearing our assemblyman talk about unfunded mandates, and all he thinks the state should pay for its mandates, and I have to agree with our assemblyman wholeheartedly on that. Now, looking at combining the regular teaching regular school and programs for children with handicapping conditions, the teaching regular school shows $6.3 million. Programs for children with handicapping conditions shows $4.4 million. So that's 41%. If you add those two together, 41% of that is for the handicapping conditions, and that's for 18.4% of our student population. So the cost per student
Well,
is,
I guess I can share a little bit with you on that, on the cost per student.
and we haven't rehearsed this, Danny. So
Well,
don't move too far to your left here.
All right.
I like to stay on the right because
Okay.
I'm conservative, but don't move because that camera won't know you're.
The same car report that came out and gave us that classification rate also gave a report on how much money we spend for a general education student versus the rest of the state, and also what we spend for a special education student versus the rest of the state. So if you look, our school district spends $6,035 on general ed, and all public schools in New York State spend about $8,177. Similar district group or similar schools would spend about $7,453. So we are under the amount of money per student in general education. In special education, our school district spends approximately $14,088 per student. And the similar schools spend $18,266, and all public schools in New York State spend about $17,667. Even though, again, we are below the normal rate or the state rate on this, you can see that there is a difference between a regular ed expense and a special ed expense.
It's well over double
Yeah.
the cost, and even though we, for some reason, are able to spend less per student than the other schools because we have a higher percentage, we obviously have a higher percent of our budget that's going toward that.
And the other thing that we try to do for our regular ed students, and we have been, is like we try to provide programs with a little cost as possible, like our electives, trying to restructure and using everything that we can so we don't have to expend a lot of money so that we can provide different opportunities for our students.
Is it possible, without breaking any state laws here or ethical laws, to just point out how extreme it can be? I know we have to actually, in some cases, send students out of state and pay for that care. So I don't want you to get into any touchy areas that you can't
Well,
talk about.
I would rather not comment on actual costs, because actual costs sometimes are related to various students, and I just would rather not comment. I just know that all I can comment on is the fact that we do have an increase of $680,910 in that category for next year, and we are still in the process of our annual reviews. And hopefully we will, there may be some more increases or there may be decreases, but we have to project all the time when it comes to the special needs population. It is a very important part of the school budget.
Okay. I didn't see, I know last year there was a big increase in benefits because of the stock market and all that stuff, and we had to fund the retirement. Do you
Right.
know offhand? I don't spot it here quickly as for
The increase in the teacher's retirement was 8.6% this year. The employees' retirement was a 10.3, and the health insurance was about 8%.
and as I mentioned in the past, we in past years state encouraged early retirement, but as I mentioned last year with you, paying people to retire at 55 and then having to pay into that retirement fund every year. It's one thing to retire than you're living on your own retirement, but when the school district has to pay into it, I don't think in the long run early retirement is to any benefit to the school district. I think encouraging that, like we did a few years ago, where they
Had
because
an
it would
incentive.
would lower the amount we're paying, because the new teacher comes in at a lower level, just like we got that administrator coming in at a lower level. So now we're paying the retirement for all these people that are retired, and now those people who have come in are moving up the ranks and earning more income too. So in the long run, it might look pretty in the short term, but in the long term,
Well, I think that, even for the incentives, and it hasn't quite been offered yet, and I don't know if it will be, but basically there has to be certain criteria that are met before you can even apply for that incentive, so.
yeah, and what do they call that? They had it's not a phase,
It's a
but
tier.
A tier. It came in, so teachers who are teaching now there's probably a few of them left in a certain tier that
Tier
have that
one.
real beneficial.
I'm in tier one. to be
You're in
honest.
tier. Well, you're old. Not as old as I am, but you're old. Okay. Obviously, transportation is going to go up, and not much we can do about that. Overall, I see a 6.7% increase in the overall school budget,
That's correct.
and we did the math here, and as far as the amount that the state is paying us, I saw a 0.79% increase from the state aid, but because other resources, and probably a notable one of those is our Vermont people not coming over, that's cutting into there. So it's not one of the, when most of us think of school budgets, we think of state aid and we think of amount to be raised by taxes. But in this case, both of them, the state aid has increased by more than what our budget has, and the amount to be raised by taxes has increased by more than what our budget has.
Yeah.
So the state aid has gone up 0.79%, and the amount to be raised by taxes has gone up 0.71%. So I know nowhere on this 4-page sheet did I see that 7.1%. I think that's one thing I've mentioned in the past, that the taxpayers really would like to to know what that is. Yes, it's important to know that the amount per thousand has gone up, whatever that you're going to pay.
61 cents, right.
But if you're, and I know people in Moore's, their assessments have jumped dramatically, so if the amount to be raised by taxes has gone up 0.71%, and the tax per thousand increase is what, 2 point something?
Oh, the tax per, it's 2.8%.
2.8%. So that's quite a difference between 7% and 2.8%. So obviously, if your assessment stayed the same, you're going up 2.8%.
Right.
If your assessment went up without driving a nail into your house, it's going up 2.8% plus whatever your assessment went up.
But unfortunately, that's nothing that the school district has control over. And I guess the thing that I wanted, if I just stress a few points, to make sure before we forget this, that I would make sure that everyone comes out to vote on the 16th, and the voting hours are between 11 and 8.
That's Tuesday the 16th.
That's Tuesday the 16th. There also will be a budget workshop on the Monday.
Monday?
Yeah.
Yep, that's
That'll be here in the high school auditorium.
it's the 15th. At what time?
I believe that's at 6:30 also.
The one in Moore's was at 6:30 last
Right.
week.
6:30, I believe it's at 6:30, even though it's not stipulated here.
Okay.
The other thing is that we really, one of the things that people will be voting on will be the buses. We have a proposition for 5 new buses. We know we are a large district, and it's really important that we just, that we have to keep, getting new buses to replace the old ones in the fleet. And this is at 90% aid ratio. The 5 buses will be approximately $84,000 a piece, and it's not to exceed $420,000. That's what the proposition will be. And the library proposition will be increased by $200, as was requested this year by our local libraries.
And if that's rejected, it goes back to the,
Right, to the amount that it was.
Yeah.
That's correct. And the rate, with the new assessments, as you mentioned, I know it's a double whammy in some cases, has gone from 5.7 to 2.8%. That makes a tax rate of $22.12. It's a 61 cent increase on per thousand. So a home of $75,000 that would have a star would be looking at about $27.45 increase on this year's budget that we're talking about. I guess the only other thing that I'd like to say, because I saw you at both concerts also, and it's really nice to be out there. And then the other night I was standing out by the, watching all the games. There were 2 baseball games going on. There was a tennis match going on. There was a track practice going on. And in light of everything, you just look at the kids and you say, that's what it's all about. When you see them actively involved, we try to provide as many programs as we possibly can for them. It's low cost as possible. And I guess that's what we're here for. So the board has done everything they possibly could to present what we consider a fiscally responsible budget.
okay. And again, the voting time, now is this 11.8, is that all districts or just our district? Everybody votes on Tuesday, but I don't,
Ours is from 11 to 8. I think some are from 12 to 9.
so different districts
Yeah.
have. And you can vote here at Northeastern or in Moore's.
Moore's, that's correct.
And if you have any questions, you can contact yourself.
Just call the office, absolutely.
And I think that should do it. And did you happen to, I think a lot of us look in the paper and see the headline on other school districts. Have you been comparing other school districts and?
Yes, I have, and I noticed that they get the big headlines. I mean, we did, of course, and we did submit the reduction, but unfortunately, it was in a very small article, and you know, but that's why I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to the people and let them know that, you know, it is going to be only a 2.8% increase, and I think that, you know, I think we have a wonderful school, and I would really like to see all our programs continue.
Okay, but 2.8% per thousand.
Right.
But I have to point out it's 7.1, but the state is kicking in 7.9 increase,
Yeah.
and the budget is going up 6.7%. And a big chunk of that is things that cannot be changed. The special ed has to increase. That's a $700,000 increase right there. And we all know fuel prices.
Right. Not much we can do about that.
And have you thought about putting up a windmill out here? Because if you come to any of the sporting events, the people out of town say, the wind's always blowing here.
That's a big controversy, isn't it?
So we need a windmill up here to help to keep our electric costs down. Outside of that, thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Calvin.